Matchmaker, matchmaker, plan me no plans. I'm in no rush. Maybe I've learned playing with matches. A girl can get burned. So bring me no ring, groom me no groom, find me no find, catch me no catch, unless he's a matchless match.
You guys, this is one of my favorite people on Broadway, and I am so excited.
I'm so excited. Thanks for coming.
Al Silber,
That's me.
welcome to AOL Build.
Thank you.
I love that you have this purple, like sort of Mohawk-esque look. When on stage, you're very like traditional, as you might say.
As one might say.
here
Yeah,
on the
it's
roof.
funny. It's so funny. Even the person Daryl, who escorted me up here, was like, "Oh, you're Al Silber." I interestingly, I was a bit sneaky when I found out I got Tzeitel. I thought they're gonna make me use my own hair because I had all this long hair, and so I walked into Alejandro's in Astoria, Queens. And I was like, cut it all off. And I got a little bob at first. And then a couple weeks after opening, Mary Check, our wig and makeup artist extraordinaire, I said, I want the full Tilda Swinton. I want the full thing. And I will never look back. It is so liberating and so exciting. And so, yeah, my little purple mohawk.
I love it. Yeah. Does when you put that wig on, is that sort of center you for your character?
Completely. I even say, there she is, and it really does it's a complete transformation. And yeah, it makes me, the wig is the kind of final piece of making me feel like Tzeitel's ready to go.
Well, you have so much going on. You're starring in Fiddler on the Roof.
Yeah.
It's a show that has a lot of history for you, and we're gonna go into that. It was also just announced that you have 2 books coming out.
Yeah.
1 memoir and 1 series of short stories, which we will again come back to in a little bit. But first I want to start talking about this brilliant masterpiece, Arlington.
Thank you.
Arlington is a show that played off-Broadway for a few months a couple of years ago, and then it was just kind of gone. Mm-hmm. But it's such a beautiful piece, and Broadway Records decided to create an album so that the show can live on. Can you talk about Arlington?
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. I was introduced to the piece, actually. The original director, Jack Cummings III, who I'd worked with because he is the artistic director of the Transport Group. I'd worked with him on the revival of Hello Again. And this piece came to him that clearly needed a very muscular and versatile singer, but also somebody that had really, really advanced interpretive skills. And he was just like, who could do this? Who could do this? And he called me out of the blue to do it in a very, very small but really interesting project called Premieres down at Urban Stages. And basically, the goal of Premieres is to set up a lyricist and a composer who have never worked together before to, in a sort of Beckett style, create a piece of solo direct address. And the original piece was about 25 minutes long. The composer, Polly Penn, and the librettist, Victor Lodato, had never worked together before, and for many months had never even physically met, worked just through the internet. And they came up with this absolutely chilling, hilarious, moving piece, and I was haunted by it. And that was in 2012. In 2014, the Vineyard picked this project up, the Vineyard Theater just off Union Square here in New York, and to expand it to a little over an hour and really, really get inside and create the physical world of this woman, Sarah Jane, who is waiting for her husband, Jerry, to come back from a sort of nondescript place in the Middle East where he is a soldier. And it was at that time also directed by Carolyn Ganter, and it was just one of these life-changing roles for me. It was I think the way to put it is, and I'm wondering if anyone else has this experience, sometimes where you go, I think I could run a marathon. I think I could, if I trained, I think I'm capable of that. I know that I couldn't do it tomorrow, but if you gave me a year, I think I could achieve that. And then there's a difference between having that instinct that you could possibly do it and then actually doing it. And there was just this feeling of extraordinary accomplishment, but also the voicing of a really important story that for whatever reason, be it emotional or political, doesn't get spoken about a lot. And I think one of the two things that I really learned from Arlington, aside from stamina and the arresting use of direct address in a theater, is I don't think I've come to any conclusions about how I feel about war and soldiering. But I do know that the people that would give up their lives for their country and the people that love them and are waiting for them at home deserve our attention and our respect. And also that there are always soldiers going away, and there is always somebody waiting at home.
I unfortunately did not have a chance to see Arlington performed live on stage. I did get to see you perform a small piece of it as part of a concert that you gave recently, and I was so affected by this 6 to 8 minute long section of it that when I found out that I could get the album, I bought it immediately. And I went home and, I feel like so used to listening to music as we run around the city or you hit shuffle on something. But for this, I actually sat in sort of a meditative stance and I put on my noise canceling headphones and I closed my eyes and I felt like I could see it. The direct address really, it affected me very much, and I felt like I was having a theatrical experience completely just through the audio.
Oh, that makes me so happy. One of the things we really tried to achieve was creating a sort of like theater of the imagination, really creating that experience of a radio play where, okay, so, we're going to take away the theatricality of it in terms of, filling a theater. And really, one of the things they talk about when you do like radio training for drama, all about radio, but radio drama training is they say, think of the microphone as the ear of the listener so that you're speaking directly to their ear. And I think specifically with the dialogue as well, really tried to make it incredibly intimate so that you're getting an experience that you didn't get in the theater. It's actually even more intimate. And I really tried to, with our engineers and all of the creative team, really lean into that because that was something that I thought, well, this is the medium now. This is how it's going to live forever. Why don't we make the most of it?
Well, this show, you really are, with a little bit of an exception, I want to mention Ben K. Moss, who plays the piano and his voice appears a few times during the show. But for the most part, you are the entirety of this recording. And so to just go back to the idea of direct address, what this felt like to me in modern parlance is kind of like a vlog.
Oh, for sure.
Like I felt like Sarah Jane has been left at home when her husband goes off to war and she doesn't know what to do. So I imagine her sort of turning on YouTube and her camera on her computer and just talking out to the world about what that experience is like. And some of it is very general, and then she gets more and more intimate about the details of her life. And one of the things she discusses is a trip to Arlington National Cemetery that she takes when she's a child. And I think it's very telling and interesting that that's the title of the piece.
Oh, without question.
When Arlington itself doesn't get mentioned until the final act of the show, the last third of the show.
I think that it's interesting. I think we all, as human beings, experience that sort of titanic crash of hope and expectation versus reality. And I think what defines who we are is how we deal with that, right? And I think that Arlington is Sarah Jane's ideal of what it means to be a soldier, that there's this precision and this nobility and this extraordinary sense of sacrifice. And that she really did believe her husband Jerry embodied those virtues. And what we discover throughout the course of the piece, it almost kind of creeps out like an oil, is that he's not an ideal. And that she has to come to grips with who he actually is and what he's actually done, and that her image of not only him, but of what a soldier might be dashed. And she will have to choose to capitulate or to grow. And we don't really get an answer to that. I think what I love about it is it challenges the individual listener to go, what would I do? What would I do if that happened to me?
Yeah. Well, changing of mindset and starting with one set of beliefs or values and totally turning them on its head, that's something that your character in Fiddler on the Roof does as well.
Absolutely. Completely. I mean, I think that's one of the things I love about playing Tzeitel is I remember having a conversation with Bart when we were first staging the first scene where Model and Tzeitel sort of beg Tevye to accept their match. And he said to me, when you say the line, "Papa, I don't want to marry him," recognize that not only has this never been uttered before, it's never been thought before. These are just not people that have that thought in their mind. And so the world, the ground beneath you really has to open up. It has to be that big of a moment. And I do feel that pressure and responsibility, but it's also an honor. Tzeitel is that moment is the inciting incident of all the change. So it's really exciting.
The first act of Fiddler on the Roof really is Tzeitel's story.
Yeah.
Starting with Matchmaker, where she takes sort of a conceptual stand about not wanting to accept the tradition. Then she takes the actual stand, convinces her father with Model's help, and then their wedding is at the end of the act.
It's so funny. Melanie Moore, who plays Chava, she goes, Act 1. Songs about Tzeitel. And when we were rehearsing it, I was like, oh yeah. But it's interesting because she actually is a very quiet character until she's squeezed. And interestingly, I feel like that's a lot like me, that I have a lot of endurance and a lot of strength, but it's very quiet. I'm not loud or political or, I don't sort of fight for things in very loud ways, but day by day by day by day, I stay true to myself, just like her. So it's an honor to serve her story because I think she represents a lot of people.
I love that you are on stage a lot more than just when you're talking and singing.
Yeah.
And I had the chance to go back to see Fiddler for the 6th time. Yes, it is that good.
It's that good.
And the 6th time I went, I just watched you. I never took my eyes off of you. And you had so many sort of complicated silent moments in the background that made me appreciate you even more as an actor than I already did. And my bar was already pretty high for you. So congratulations. And you have so much else going on. So this is not the first time that you've been in Fiddler.
That's right.
You got your start in professional theater on the West End.
That's right, yeah.
And you performed one of the other sisters.
I did. So interestingly, my sort of the beginning of my adult life was in the UK. And I went to drama school at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland in Glasgow, and was one of the first Americans to go, actually. And so it was a big, incredible culture shock, but also a wonderful cultural awakening. And I love going back there and returning to teach and talk to them and stay connected to them. And from there, I was sort of plucked in my final year to take over for Jill Pace, a wonderful Broadway actor, in Andrew Lloyd Webber's The Woman in White. And I hadn't studied musical theater, so everyone in my class was a little like, what's going on?
She told me she's never had a singing lesson.
Well, at that time, I hadn't. At that time I was, and I've trained subsequently. But yeah, it's interesting. I was a bit of a natural singer. And, I started my career in the West End in musicals, and right after Woman in White finished, I actually was cast as Hoddle in Fiddler on the Roof, the second oldest daughter who follows her husband, the socialist Perchik, who was Ben Rappaport plays in our production. He was interviewed here. And she follows him to Siberia. And for me, Hoddle was a project that over the entire course of doing it, I did for about 2 years. And it was without question the most deeply experienced and deeply felt role I'd ever played. I felt like it was just me in a different time period in different clothing. And I think not to, dwell on it too personally, but the big sort of like mythological event of my life, and one of the reasons I went to Scotland, was because my father passed away when I was 18. And I had this moment of choice where I went, okay, I could proverbially curl up and die and stay in my hometown and and get married and have a bunch of babies, which I do not want to disparage that dream if it's someone's actual dream, but it wasn't mine. Or I could, in the face of all this loss, really live, really have an adventure, and really be brave, because there's really nothing else to be afraid of. And so I thought, I'm gonna move to Scotland. So I did. And I think what's interesting is two things. I was able to use Hoddle's train station scene, where she very famously says, "Papa, God alone knows when we shall see each other again," as a way to really grieve and say goodbye to my father, and also really feel the parallel of an 18-year-old girl getting on a plane to Scotland and an 18-year-old girl getting on a train to Siberia to God knows what, and this feeling that she was going to be okay. And I think that's what inspired me to continue writing her story, and has subsequently led to my book After Anatevka.
So Al has 2 books that will be coming out soon. One is the story of Hoddle after she gets on that train and goes to Siberia, and the other is the story of Al after she gets on that plane and goes to Scotland.
Well, it's actually what happens just before. So it's an interesting, the memoir is called White Hot Grief Parade. And for any of you who have experienced grief, I think you would probably go, that is really accurate. It took me a long time to come up with it. And I wanted to, you and I have talked about this personally, like this moment of, whenever we tell our story of survival or of achievement, you're kind of like, this horrible thing happened to me, fast forward, and then it turned out okay, right? And you kind of like do a 20-second version of how it was hard, you know what I mean? And I wanted to focus very specifically on the hard, on the daily drudgery of grieving. And because for me, it was very difficult, but it was also filled with a lot of laughter and a lot of joy and a lot of incredible support from my other 18-year-old friends and my spectacularly strong mother. And I wanted to sort of say, I think all good art says, this is my soul, not shoved in your face, not covered up. This is me exposed. You too? You too? And that's the kind of art I respond to, and I wanted to create it. And I never had any real ambitions of them being in the world, but I sort of can't believe it now. And the After Anatevka is, for me, was a very personal task about going, I embodied this woman for so long, she haunted me deeply. This girl gets on a train, and what happens to her?
Yeah, we never hear from her again.
We never hear from her again.
The play.
Exactly. As playing Tzeitel, I'm realizing we at least get to know that she has a baby, they get the sewing machine, we know they're going to Warsaw, we get a little bit of what happens to Model and Tzeitel, but it's just this void and all these politics and huge European events, and I couldn't rest until I knew what happened to her. And so the fact that I can share it with the world is a dream beyond all imagining. So I'm so excited. Thank you, Pegasus Books, by the way, who has picked up both projects. I should say thank you, Pegasus.
So I'm really curious to know sort of like the legality of how you can take characters that belong to somebody else.
Sure.
Is it because you have a relationship with Sheldon Harnick that he was able to be like, yeah, take him, go?
Well, I do have a relationship with Sheldon. I mean, he's sort of my artistic grandfather in a lot of ways, was very present for the London production and was very present for the Broadway production. And How Sunrise Sunset, to sort of be with him and continue to play older and older characters, like, I'll be done when I'm playing Grandma Tzeitel. But actually, because Shalom Aleichem wrote the stories around the turn of the century, the characters are in public domain. So I just kind of decided to take my own liberties with them and take the characters that are in the supporting shadows and throw light on them. And I think I think everybody's going to really respond to it. I hope so. I hope so.
Is there a date yet for that book?
It's definitely, After Anatevka is going to come first. It's slated for late spring, summer of 2017, and White Hot Grief Parade for 2018.
So much exciting
crazy
stuff happening.
I know, it's crazy. And you know what's also interesting, and again, I welcome everybody to identify, is it's sort of amazing to sort of be sitting here talking about all these projects, because it feels like a flurry of fruition. And yet, I really did just write like for 20 minutes a day in my dressing room between scenes for years on end. You know, I think there's a really exciting difference between like being a natural, being talented at something, and working very, very, very hard. And I'm not a natural writer. I'm a very hardworking one. And I think that's a hopeful thing, because what I hope this experience can illuminate for everyone here and watching is that hard work and determination, little bit by little bit, wonderful things do happen. And it's not always about being talented. Sometimes it's about having some talent and working very, very hard.
That basically is my life's mission, and I'm so happy.
You're
that
an
you
example of that too.
Thank you.
You are,
You
yeah.
articulated that so beautifully. We're going to go take a couple questions from the audience, but first, I hope you don't mind me sharing something that you have said to me in our personal conversation. But you said something recently that was, and I'm afraid I'm going to get a little bit wrong, but you said, I did it by myself, but I didn't do it alone.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it. I really believe that, you know, I think, again, opening it up, that how many books have you read where you felt incredibly close to the author? Or music that's come through your speaker and you go, I know this person. People that have mentored you, taught you, people that have inspired you that you've never made contact with, but you know everything about them. From the distant to the actual practical day-to-day, I did not become Alexandra Silber alone. Everything that I've done, though, I know I did in solitude. Mm-hmm. And I think that both of those things are possible. And you have to take responsibility for your hard work and your determination, but you also have to be really, really grateful for the people that helped you.
I love that. I referred to you in a tweet earlier today as a philosopher, and I really believe that. You say so many brilliant things. I hope you carry around a notebook and just write them down, because I think your third book is going to be a book of inspirational quotes.
I don't know about that. I have to say again, I'm so inspired by the people around me, and I have the great privilege also of teaching, and I'm so inspired by my students daily. And sometimes we'll be in class and I'll be like, da 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 da. Someone write that down. That was good. and so, you know, it's, again, I might have come up with it myself, but I wouldn't have done it had I not been in the presence of their inspiration.
We're going to take a few questions from the audience.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Alexandra. I'm over here. Hi. So I actually played Tzeitel in high school, and it was probably like my favorite role that I've ever done.
Oh, I love that. So we have to, afterwards, we have to take what I call a Tzeitel selfie.
Totally. We'll do it.
Okay. You spell it with a T?
Oh, yeah.
Selfie.
Selfie.
Oh, totally. I play Kava, too, so like I have one more to go. But so I just wanted to know, what's your favorite scene or song in the show to perform, and then what's your favorite one to watch?
Oh, I love that question. My favorite scene or song to perform, it's a kind of a funny answer, is the sewing machine scene. Oh, I love that. Oh, that's so nice to know. I think what's really interesting is that it is the moment of purest joy in the entire 3-hour evening. That there's something about a goal, wish, dream coming true in a very physical way. You know, we've heard about models saving up for this machine all night long, and then there it is. And the symbolism of what it's going to represent for them financially and in terms of their security, and also that industry is here. A new wave is upon us. And my favorite scene to watch is, without question, the wedding dance, because I'm just in awe of the talent in my company.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for coming in.
Oh,
I was
my pleasure.
fortunate enough to see the show once, and the moment I left, I couldn't wait to see it again. So it's on my bucket list for a second time.
Oh,
really,
thank
really
you.
loved the show. So my question is, you play a very diverse character, and I feel like I related to some stuff that you had to go through the, on the show. Was there ever something that you learned while playing the character that you got to apply to your real life?
That's a really good question. Yeah, I think kind of not dissimilar to what I'm saying. I think it might have reiterated something, which is, if you have a very, very specific dream and goal, no matter how impossible it may seem, keep believing, keep fighting for it. And for her, I think Tzeitel's greatest purpose in life is to be the wife of Model Cams Oil. And for us, we now see that as very small, but it's hugely meaningful to her. And she, through her bravery, she makes it come true. Hi.
Hi. I wanted to ask you, if you could play a biop of any woman that you admire, who would you play?
Oh, that's so good. If I could play a biop of any woman I admire. I think I have a couple answers. I think I would love to get a crack at Maria Callas. I was so fortunate enough to be in the revival of Masterclass by Terrence McNally, and that is definitely on my role bucket list for a little later in my life. And Cleopatra.
In Shakespeare?
Yeah.
Ooh.
I think Shakespeare's Cleopatra. And I also find the life of Irini Pappas, the Greek actress, really fascinating, and I don't think she gets her due in the history of film and theater, so I'd love to play her too. Thank you. You're welcome.
Al Silber, I could continue talking to you for another 4 or 5 hours. I think the studio is in use with other projects, but I hope you'll come back.
I'd love
and
that.
I cannot rave highly enough about Arlington, about Fiddler. I cannot wait for your books to come out.
Thank you.
And to see everything else that you achieve in the rest of your lifetime.
Thanks, Laura. Thank you for having me, guys.